Hi guys, welcome to another Zoom tasting with Grapenuts. I'm fortunate today to have Steve Eudy, Fine Wine Manager for Empire Distributors. I'm Garland with Grapenuts Wine. We've got a really interesting tasting for you guys this evening. We got a little feedback from a microphone. We've got 3 sherries we're going to try and some vermouth to make some cocktails with at the end. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about sherry, what sherry is, where it comes from. Should be pretty straightforward. I'm going to hand it over to Steve since he's the professional at this. So without further ado, Steve Eudy from Empire Distributors.
So sherry, it's a wine that's tremendously misunderstood. So many people don't know that much about it. And it's mostly because of ignorance that people shy away from it. So that's we want to break down some of that today. Sherry comes from Spain. It comes from a very specific part of Spain, which is the southern tip called WEDGES. Sherry is actually the English bastardization of that word. And the sherry is made in basically 2 different kinds of categories. You have wine that is fermented and then stored underneath a floor cap or a yeast cap in a barrel. And what it does is it's an active living thing. It actually keeps oxygen away from the sherry. So it's a neutral environment. And then you have sherry that is seized, if not all its life in aged barrels like bourbon, and they are not airtight. Oxygen actually oxidizes the wine, and that's what brings out some of the flavors that you see in it. And those are basically the 2 main types of sherry you're going to see that you'll see today. There's actually, depending on what book you read, somewhere between 10 and 15 different classifications of sherry, but we're going to kind of hit the high, the medium, and the low for the spectrum of styles. We're going to start off with FINO sherry, which is what the one that is fermented underneath the floor cap. This is arguably the driest wine in production. Least amount of residual sugar because the yeast itself is living off of that. So with the product you get out is tremendously dry. Now, when you're tasting wines for the first time, this is not what you want to give somebody for their first wine they ever want to taste. These wines are fortified, or parts of them are fortified. This one is not, and they use alcohol to stop the fermentation process when they're trying to get sugar left behind in things like the Pedro Menes. But that's kind of where sherry sits as a starting point. And we're going to start off with the Tío Pepe.
So real quick, the red arrow down there at the bottom left of the map of Spain is where Jerez is, just to point that out to you guys, really close to the coast. So you get some sherry is going to have a lot of maritime influence, a really like salty sherry in some cases. It just is up to the winemaker.
And FINO is usually the one that's going to taste the most. Very, very strong saline characteristic to FINO sherries. And they're beautiful. All sherry, I will say, as you're starting, sherry should always be cold. I don't care what the color is, it should be cold. So keep sherry in the fridge. That's before you start enjoying it.
Okay, so real quick, we're going to talk about going a little quick there. All right, just what the Solera system is, and everybody can see on their screen. You want to talk?
Yeah, I'll be glad to. So Solera. So this is what's called a racking system. And racking in wine is where you're actually, if you're just making like Chardonnay, you use racking to get any particulates, anything that's settled to the bottom away from the wine. So you put it in a cask, let it sit, all the heavy things sink to the bottom, and then you pump out from above it. And what that does is you end up with a clearer wine. They use that same method to age wines, especially sherry and including ports, but most effectively, this system actually started with sherry, and that is the Solera system. And you'll see on the slide, there's actually a system. Now, it's not usually in a warehouse, or it's not set up in a pyramid. In a warehouse, it's just long rows of barrels stacked, sometimes up to 5 or 6 high. When you are making sherry, the first thing you will do is harvest and start your fermentation. When that happens, you bottle, and you bottle from the bottom cask, the Solera at the very, very bottom. And you'll usually bottle about 60% of the barrel. So you're going to leave 20 to 30% of wine in the bottom of that barrel. And then you're going to fill that barrel up with the row above it. And then you're going to fill that barrel up with the row above it. And then your fermentation is going to be done. And you'll put your brand new wine in the very top level of that system. So as it moves down, it interacts with wines that could be decades old, 40, 50 years old. It's just like a blended scotch. Like, it could be ancient, because you're always leaving that 30%. The analogy that I had a sherry maker explain it to me. He said the Solera at the bottom is a lot like sourdough bread. There's always the starter, the very beginning, and it could date back to the first time they ever made sherry. You don't know, because it's a blend at the bottom. And that's the Solera system.
Anyways, we'll go to next, talk about Gonzalez Byass real quick. You can see on the screen kind of a starter, but if anybody's ever read Windows of the World, Gonzalez Byass is literally at the top of the list for sherry producers. There's a couple others, Lustow. You could probably name more than I can.
Osborne is another big one. The big thing about sherry, this one is not only is it one of the most popular ones internationally, but it is one of the most popular sherries in Spain as well. If you're ever in Madrid, in the Maine courtyard there in Madrid, on one end of it, there's a giant Tío Pepe sign. Like, it is like Times Square in Madrid, and it is a tremendously important product to them. And as a house, they tend to be a little bit on the leaner side of sherries. They're not tremendously heavy in each style, because even though sherries are made in so many different styles, if you're making a FINO, they tend to all be similar in general, but each house makes theirs a little bit different. And that's the way Gonzalez Byass does as well. Theirs is a little bit on the leaner, lighter styles of each of the styles.
So we'll just touch on VARS. That's just kind of a term for old aged sherry. They have a lot. They actually have sherries much older than 30 years or more, most of which they do not export, unfortunately. And vermouths. We're going to try some of their vermouths later when we make some cocktails. So with that, we'll go to the FINO.
Yeah. So FINO. This one is 100% the Palomino grape. There's really 3 grapes in making sherry: Palomino, Pedro Jimenez, and another one escapes my mind. But it's a good thing, because Gonzalez Byass doesn't use that one. And so everything that they make, most sherries are going to be made up of Palomino and Pedro Jimenez. This one is 100% Palomino. And this is one that sees its entire life underneath a floor cap. And it is going to be clear like white wine. I don't know if you'll be able to see it very well, but this is FINO sherry. And when I say it is a dry wine,
it's less than 4 grams per liter residual sugar, and it's extremely low.
Exactly. Most wine that people consume, it's rare for you to find one under 1 gram of residual sugar. The reason they put the 0.4 is just in case there is some in it. Most of the time, it's about as close to zero as you're going to find.
We have a quick question from Art. So you don't need to age sherry when you buy it?
Nope. It is aged all it's ever going to age. It's a lot like tawny port. When you open the bottle, that is as old as that wine is ever going to get. It's not going to get better over 20, 30 years unless it is a vintage dated sherry. And that is a rare thing.
It used to be a not thing, and now
Right.
they've kind of brought it back. It's kind of now all the rage, so to speak.
Right. A lot of houses have made it for hundreds of years, but it was only at the house. Like it was just something for them or in the region. It never got sold anywhere. It was usually used as kind of a benchmark or a tasting library. Now you're starting to see them. They're trying to market them, but no. Long answer, you don't need to age sherry. It's going to taste the same year to year. It's a little bit like champagne. They're hitting a house style every single year.
Okay. Cheers.
Cheers. There's a thing with sherry, especially if you ever have sherry that is under a floor. This is the smell for a lot of people that they find false. They equate it to sherry. You're supposed to smell it here, and that's that slight kind of yeasty characteristic. But you're not supposed to get that in other wines. The reason it's here is because it sees that floor cap. And like I said, this is not entry-level wine. But if you've experienced wine for a little while and want to tiptoe into it, this is such an amazing wine. And once you have it, it's something that you'll always love. When you have somebody offer it to you, it's great. I will say on the slide, it's one of the really cool things. There are two pictures there. Both of them are of the floor cap, and that thing you see sticking through it is a Venentia, and that thing is the way they taste it. It's like a little taster cup. When they pull it out, that yeast will actually grow itself and close back over that product over like a day. So
Questions are more than welcome, for the record.
absolutely, the more the better. I'd rather answer what you are interested in than.
So the sherry makers, if you can go online and see sherry makers pull with the Venentia. They pull it out. They have a tiny little tasting glass. And what they'll do is they have just a little thimble of wine, maybe this much, and their hand is here, and the thimble is, or excuse me, the Venentia is like this tall. And the guy takes it and pours from up high and doesn't miss a drop. Anytime you ever see an artisan sherry maker do it, it's crazy to watch.
One of the, and this is a completely personal story to me. A lot of people are looking for low calorie, low carb. FINO sherry is about as low carb as you're ever going to get when it comes to wine. And a lot of people don't want to drink it like this all the time. So I was going to show you guys how I usually drink it on a daily basis. And that's, it's my, and this is, I usually equate it to a lot like a gin and tonic. It's just ice, lime, FINO sherry, and soda water. And it is one of the most refreshing drinks you're ever going to get a hold of. And the really cool part about this, and this is why you're going to start to see, and we're going to talk about this more and more as we go on through this, really high-end bars are starting to make more and more sherry cocktails. And the reason is the Tio Pepe is only 15% alcohol. So if you make a cocktail with this, like the 2 ounces I just used, that's a fraction of what a regular cocktail will have. So you could have much more of these for the same alcohol volume. You probably have 3 or 4 of these for that would equal like 1 gin and tonic or 1 bourbon and ginger, because of how low the ABV is in this. And you kind of get the same refreshing qualities, but you can enjoy them all afternoon, which is why I usually drink these. And I think they're delicious.
It's a very versatile tool. It's a really neat wine, but extremely versatile thing for any guy or any person to have it behind their bar. So we're going to move on. You see there down at the bottom, that's the pricing for you. It does come in half bottles. And for the record, once you open a sherry, it's got the same cap that you'll see if anybody's ever had ports or any other fortified wine. This sucker can sit in the fridge for months without changing its profile. And because of that, it's extremely versatile.
Absolutely. If you go on their website, they'll tell you that the FINO sherries don't last as long as the others, and that's just because it's not in contact with oxygen during its aging. But I've had bottles around for more than a couple weeks, and they've been pristine when I've used them. The ones that do see any part of an barrel aging part, like the next one we're going to try, it was in a barrel for 8 years in presence of oxygen. It's not going to go bad. It is going to be fantastic on your counter. Don't be scared of opening one and only want to use a little bit, and you think you've got to just use it the same way you do a regular one. You've got time, so nothing to worry about.
With that, we're going to move on to the Amontillado.
We're going to pour that one. Now, Amontillado, this is kind of towards the leaner side of classifications. You're about 4 levels darker when it comes to Amontillado. This particular one starts out as Tio Pepe. Okay, so it is a FINO sherry for 4 years. Okay. It is under a floor cap for 4 years. Then they decide the barrels that show the flavor profile they're looking for that lend itself a little bit more towards a richer style, doesn't quite have the salinity they're looking for, like for a Tio Pepe. Then they will take it out and put it into barrels that were in the Solara system, but they just put them in those barrels and don't rack them down. It's just for aging. It's not going to they're not going to move it down into older wines. And then they will leave it in that barrel that sees oxygen for 8 years. So this has been as oxidized as you could possibly get it. It's not going to get any more oxidized. We can leave the cap off of this for the next 3 days. It'll taste exactly the same because it's been in presence of oxygen. And you get much more of the characteristics you're going to think you see from other spirits, other wines that see barrels, especially barrels that are used. You're going to get a nutty caramel characteristic to the wine that just can't be replicated in other things. You don't see things like this outside of sherry. Ports are always darker or much, much lighter, like FINO. So it's a beautiful, beautiful wine. So good. It's almost hazelnutty. And as you start seeing the Palomino go into barrel, you'll see more and more creamy notes start showing up in the wine. And this is just starting off to have this slight, rich, creamy characteristic from that barrel aging.
So there's a couple of questions.
Yes.
Let's see here. Is this the one I should be smoking my cigar with?
Absolutely. I will say this when it comes to sherry. They're all good with cigars. Depends on where you're smoking it. If you're on the porch in North Carolina in July, you should be drinking FINO with your cigar. If it's nice and cold, you're sitting inside, maybe a leather chair, you want to get on the other end of the spectrum, and you'll start to see when we get down to the nectar, they get darker and darker and darker. This one's black when you pour it. It looks like molasses. And that's that cold weather, deep, rich characteristic with a cigar. So if you're going to be drinking, I would think about it the same as you would look at the cocktail you're going to have with your cigar. Middle of summertime, you might be having your cigar with a gin and tonic. Middle of winter, you might be having it with a bourbon or a scotch, depending on where you are. The Amontillado is much more in that scotch kind of characteristic. You got a lot more of those kind of characters.
Another question, food pairings.
For FINO, bright, acid, seafood, that goes fantastic with it. Vinegars go good with this. Anything salt. In Portugal, southern Spain, there's a dish called bacalhau. It's a salted cod. They'll use all the time, and that's a classic thing you'll see with sherries. It's also amazing with cured meats, nuts, cheeses, a lot of the really hard cheeses that have a saline characteristic. They go great with FINO. When you start getting down here, you start getting much more into the cured meats, those types of things, nuts, those kinds of characteristics. Even when you start getting to things that are made a little bit like the marsala or like things with a brandy sauce, steak with a brandy sauce, those would be great with this. And I'd encourage you, we're going about this learning these first. I encourage you to, if you want to start out with sherry, start out with the cocktails you're going to see tonight, because that'll kind of back you into these wines. Because to the novice, sometimes they can be a little austere. But once you come to appreciate them, they're hard to put down. They're hard to get away from.
For sure. The artichokes and asparagus actually was pulled directly from Gonzalez Byass's
Yes.
website. And asparagus is notorious in the wine world for being something that nobody ever wants to pair with any wine.
Absolutely. Like everybody's scared of it. Asparagus and artichokes. They go great with this. And it's that slightly higher alcohol perception you see in sherries. It kind of cuts through a lot of stuff. And your sherry's going to be cold, regardless of how dark it is. So it's great with heavy foods. It kind of lightens it up, cuts through any dense, rich things. Sherry is very, very versatile. I would tell you to think about the Spanish table. There's going to be as much meat and seafood on the table, very, very lower in spices. They're not going to have tons and tons of spices, but they are just amazing with a variety of food.
With that, on to the big dog.
Excellent. So we're going to move on to what most people would use as a dessert. And this is 100% Pedro Jimenez. So this is it is their nectar, but it says right on there, Pedro Jimenez. This is the lowest, I keep saying lowest. This is the darkest you're going to get. And you'll see as we pour it, it is black.
It comes out syrupy. Almost, not quite Mrs. Butterworth's, but.
And it will have a lot of the same characteristics you're going to expect if you were to smell something made with molasses. You're going to have those slightly burned notes, those slightly rich, smoky notes. You're going to have a lot of the, I get lots of cashews and almonds with it. There's a cream characteristic to it. Almost tiramisu-like is what I usually equate it to. Lots of coffee notes in this. And it is to me, one of the best dessert wines you can serve. And I'll show you, we're going to finish tonight with one of the best ways to finish a meal I've ever had. You're going to see it tonight, and it involves this wine right here. But it is divine as a glass, just like that. I will say it is high in sugar. Pour small. You don't want to have a 7-ounce glass of this. You probably won't finish it. It's intense, but it's a beautiful, beautiful wine. Serve it like a dessert wine. You'll serve it in small amounts. People will not understand where you got it and how amazing it is. It's a really, really good experience. It's something most people have never even seen or had before.
The first two sherries were less than 4 grams per liter sugar, residual sugar content. The bricks on this is like 340 grams per liter. So if you think about that, that's a lot of sugar.
It is, and I mean, it's hard to see here, but if you ever want to teach somebody about legs on wine or what it's going to look like, this is the one to do it with, because it's just it'll turn a glass kind of brownish. It looks like it's smoked just from the tears on these ones. It's because of the amount of sugar left in it. And again, this is not incredibly high in alcohol. This is 15% alcohol. So it's one that it's very easy to have. You've had a bottle of wine, have a little glass of Pedro Jimenez sherry to finish off the meal. Beautiful, beautiful way to finish. Great thing to have instead of dessert.
For sure. So I've got on the screen some workers drying out PX. You'll hear PX in the wine industry just because you don't want to say Pedro Jimenez over and over. But what they do is they dry these grapes out, so they lose a fair amount of their water content. So that's where some of that sugar comes from. And it's a crazy thing researching all this, looking at how these guys lay out. You can kind of see it in the PowerPoint, but they lay out the grapes, and it's under guard like crazy. That not just the grapes themselves, but how everybody does it, because everybody does it differently, and that's what makes Gonzalez Byass just different from Lustow or whoever you want to pick.
And when you start tasting these, when you start doing a little more research into them and understand where they come from, just to kind of put it in perspective, Jerez, Spain, where these are made and where they're drying those grapes, is closer to Morocco than it is Madrid. You're almost at Gibraltar, so it's just across the Strait of Gibraltar to get to Morocco. So you're almost in North Africa. So think about how hot that area is, and they make wines like this. Normally, you wouldn't assume that kind of temperate, you would make a very big, dense, rich wine. But you're going to serve it very, 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 very cold. You're going to serve it with very specific things. And the influence of Africa there, you're going to have lots of dates, lots of cured, dried fruits that would go just fantastic with this. So you're going to see a lot of that as desserts. Their desserts are going to be very simple. Another thing this would go amazing with, traditional Spanish flan from southern Spain.
So we got another question.
Yes, sir.
Is there a typical glass to serve sherry in?
There are sherry glasses. They're going to be very, very small. I would not go out looking for a sherry glass. If you go to a restaurant when I'm with like the Alejandro from Gonzalez Byass, he doesn't want dessert wine glasses from the restaurant. He just wants a simple white wine glass. As long as the sherries are cold. It looks a lot like a white wine glass, just shrunk down by about half is what a sherry glass looks like. You don't need one to enjoy sherry. They do it just so portion sizes are easy to measure, but there's no real reason you need to go search out that. It won't, for the novice, it's not going to make the wine better.
For sure.
The glass you have will be fantastic. I would not serve them in great big giant 29-ounce Bordeaux glasses. I would serve it in a smaller white wine glass if you have one. But
if you have dessert wine glasses,
those would be great.
The PX would do better, you know, after dinner kind of thing. That's really the only time I see it being. And
a lot of times you'll see that served in the small glass almost as a signal to the guest having it. This is really intense, so we're only giving you a little bit. If you give PX to someone in a great big glass, they might go to just drink it like a regular wine. You're not. You're sipping that because it is intense. So that's why a lot of times you'll see, especially the sweeter ones served in smaller glasses, it's almost a signal to the person you're serving it to. Hey, this is very sweet and very intense. You want to have just a little bit. But if you already know what it is and you're at home, there's no need to go search out a special glass for it. Just pour it in your wine glass. You'll be set to go.
Cool deal. So there are the three sherries.
And this barely cracks the surface of sherry. We could fill this table and not cover all the categories.
The cocktails are next. So intentionally, we wanted to do the cocktails on the fly because I know there's some of you guys out there that are doing cocktails right now and have not done this yet. So it may help. You know, we've got some slides. So we're going to start, not including Steve's wonderful club soda and FINO sherry. We're going to start with the Spanish Spritz. So I'm going to move away. You want to rent? I'm going to switch to make one. So Spanish Spritz is 1.5 ounces of FINO sherry. We're going to use a shot glass and just kind of estimate, because the best drinks are always just estimated. This has Cava. If you grab the Cava, it's at the bottom of the fridge. Lemon and lime wedges and an ounce of ginger syrup. And I don't even think I have the ginger syrup, so we're just going to fake it. But I know the people that are doing this at home have ginger syrup. What do I have to do? This goes on the rocks. So. Get the ginger syrup.
You know, it still tastes. Sherry's going to taste good regardless of what you add to it.
So I'm going to assume that's 1 ounce.
Oh, pretty good.
Yeah, just let you know that. Lemon and lime. Leave those in there.
Sure.
And then
Decoration.
cover with Cava. Very little sugar. If there was sugar in here, there's a little sugar in the fruit. But if there was sugar in here, what would happen is you would watch this Cava explode over top of the glass. Give it a baby stir. There you go. It's delicious. I don't have COVID.
Wow, that's really good. And this is just beginning. I'm gonna probably repeat this probably 4 more times. This is a great way to tiptoe your way into sherry. Go get a bottle of sherry. It is okay to look at sherry as if you're buying a bottle of spirits from the liquor store and make cocktails with it. It's also a way to enjoy this and enjoy cocktails, especially really nice cocktails that are low in alcohol. You're gonna have 2 or 3 of these, and I mean, you're not gonna feel it. It's extremely low in alcohol. We used 1.5 ounces, a regular, so 15 ounce or 50% alcohol on a regular wine. You're gonna get 6 ounces in a glass in a restaurant. The one we just made had 1.5 ounces of the same type of thing as if you were using Chardonnay. So it's really surprising how little alcohol is in these drinks, and they taste just like you're using
Is it good?
just like you're using another alcohol.
Anybody have any questions about the Spanish Spritz before we move on?
I would highly recommend them. That was really good.
Trying to see if I know Cameron and Nisa are over there somewhere making some. Hey, I'm gonna unmute you guys and hear how the Spanish Spritz went.
Okay, all right, let's do it. How do I comment?
We're unmuted. No, you're unmuted.
Just talking. I hear you talking.
Oh, it's it's great.
It's great. Is that all you got? No pressure.
We're topping off with Cava right now.
Okay, cool. So you guys had the ginger. There's a little bit of ginger. You could probably use any kind of, fruity extract. It doesn't have to be ginger because the sherry is pretty, taste neutral. Cava is a really, it's not your champagne. You're not going to have levels of different tasting flavors. Cava is pretty straightforward. So you can it could be ginger syrup. It could be off the top of my head.
Okay.
Any fruity extract.
This probably work with things like lychee a little bit. You can make it a little Asian. You can use lemongrass probably. very versatile type of cocktail. And it's tremendously refreshing, delicious. I think.
Have y'all tried it yet?
So, almost. We're getting there. Give us one more second.
You start the
Okay.
next one.
All right, wait. All right, we're trying it. All right, let's try it. Yay. Okay. Okay. It's good. It's actually really good.
Well, good.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Very
Okay, we're
ginger.
gonna-
I'm tasting a lot of ginger.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Ours is probably closer to Steve's club soda trick, but the Cava helps.
The Cava helps a lot.
Yeah.
I like it.
Okay, we'll bring you guys back in a sec.
Okay. All right.
Okay, on to the bamboo. So this is a little more, shall we say, difficult cocktail to make.
Right. So let me tell you my story with the bamboo, and that is 2 years ago when we actually finally got all the sherries from Gonzalez Byass. We actually had the honor in Raleigh, North Carolina, or the Triangle itself, to have something called the Tio Pepe Challenge. They did it in 7 cities every year throughout the world. There were 5 of them done in the U.S. Raleigh got 1 of them. And we had a guy by the name of Alejandro come in, and he was teaching us cocktails. And then the challenge was local.
Oh yeah, local recipes.
Yeah, local
I'm
local bartenders to make up a sherry cocktail, and they entered this competition. And the winner got like a trip to sherry for a week. But anyway, the expert was there, and he was showing us previous cocktails that were made, and he was like, "Well, here's one of the originals. This is a cocktail from like the late 1800s, early 1900s. It's called the Bamboo." And I remember picking it up and trying it for the first time, and I was floored how good it was. It tastes like summertime in a glass. And it really depends also on the sherry you use, because the Bamboo isn't specific to the sherry. I've always made it with FINO and made it very bright. I've seen people who use Amontillado. I've seen people who go all the way down to like Oloroso in it, and it gets a darker shade, almost like what you see on the slide. We're using the FINO tonight just because that's the one I had used before. So,
You know what else? Okay. It's all right. So it's going to come out unlike what you're saying because I don't have orange bitters.
and we use FINO. What you see a lot is used with Amontillado, but it's a great drink. This is one of my favorite sherry cocktails I've ever seen done. Is the Bamboo.
It's delicious. It needs some orange bitters.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic. It does need a little orange bitters, but it's really good.
So we're going to bring, let's see how fast they made this cocktail. Lisa, Cameron, are you guys still there?
I don't know.
Yes, we're still there. We're working on it. Y'all are going so fast. We're muddling the orange. Okay, hey, I have a question. In the recipe, can
Sure.
I use this?
Use what? I can't see that.
Okay, I'm going to tell you what it is. So it says in the recipe, it says which one? We were trying to figure out.
The recipe's on the screen.
Okay.
Oh no, we're just looking at y'all trying to be like that Betty Crocker show or whatever it is.
Julia Child? Is that what you're trying to say?
Okay. Basically, I was looking at the.
A traditional Bamboo has 2 different bitters, I think. I think it's orange and Angostura.
Okay,
Yes,
we
is
don't
that what
have
you're
the
looking at?
orange. So can we
Yeah.
use this instead of
Yes,
the orange?
sure. Just use a touch.
Is that the
Okay,
ginger?
touch this. Yes. Can we use that?
No, you
again?
don't need ginger. You don't need ginger in this.
Okay, but we don't have an orange bitter.
Yeah, we did.
Just use regular bitters.
You have the Jack Rudy. Those are orange bitters.
So this.
Yeah.
So you want me
That's vermouth. That's what you want. That's the 1.5 ounces of dry vermouth.
okay, all right.
And then the little thing with the stopper are bitters.
Got it.
Bitters are very powerful. They're meant to be dashed, so to speak.
Right.
Got it. All right, we've almost got this one. Okay, the orange is muddled.
How much was it? 1.5?
1.5 ounces.
Where's the simple syrup?
It's already in
Right.
this. I already measured it out. You poured it.
Start
Wow.
that.
I
Let's
had
start
it.
with mint cobbler.
Yeah, we'll start that one.
Okay.
3 ounces.
Yeah, but first you got to muddle the.
Okay.
All right, we're gonna move on to the next one. All right,
While they're doing that.
so this is the mint cobbler. Ready? Sure. You know what I'm gonna do real fast? Yeah. Okay. Watch this magic trick. We can't.
Mint leaves. Go in next.
The recipe's right there.
No, I was looking at the order. At 10 mint leaves. Not nice.
That makes 10, yeah.
Good enough. Good work.
0.5, so just
Good.
that much.
Shake it. I got the
Yeah.
Make sure I didn't miss anything.
We're pouring this in a martini glass. You can totally put this on ice. It's,
Oh, yeah, I'd
it's
put it
up to
on.
you.
Go.
That might be my favorite. That's outstanding. It's a double strain too, but it's okay.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. That's really good.
So hopefully you guys have some mint leaves in your garden.
Yeah, it's minty, but in a good way.
Cameron and Nisa, do you guys finish your cocktail?
Yes. They were so good. The best one yet.
Best one yet? Was
Yeah.
the second one not the mint cobbler? Have you done the mint cobbler?
They haven't got that far yet.
No. We're not there yet.
The one before that.
Okay, that's okay. We'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so for the last one, and you can wait on showing the
Sure.
slide. It goes along with a little story, and it goes back to when I first started learning about wine. There was a gentleman that started teaching me about wine. His name was Jefferson Napier, and he was the assistant sommelier at the Angus Bar. And I just started as a he was the assistant sommelier at the Angus Bar, and I just started as a servant. And we used to come out with this dessert tray. I probably could still do it today, 16 years later. With God, it had like 8 or 9, probably 10 or 12 desserts on it. And he was actually talking to us more about a sales thing. People didn't really want dessert. Maybe they just don't want something that's on the tray. Be creative. And I was talking to him about sherry, and he said, one of the best desserts you're ever going to see One of the best desserts you're ever going to have as a way to finish off the night, and it's inexpensive and easy to do in a restaurant. It's a take on an Italian affogato, okay? And basically, it is as simple as a single scoop of ice cream, just lightly drizzled with Pedro Jimenez sherry. And I know I was telling Garland and Shelley about this the other day, and I explained to them how amazingly good this was. And I said, we have to do it for this thing, just so when we finish, we can finish off with this. I've tried this recently, I want to say in the last 6 months, on 2 different 5-star style chefs who were blown away by how good this is. And it is on their menus now. And it is an amazing way to finish a night. And it is as simple as vanilla ice cream with a little drizzle of Pedro Jimenez sherry on top. It's shockingly good. I can't wait for go ahead and try it, Garland, because I want his reaction, because I've had this many times. I know I love it. But there's something about the cream and Pedro Jimenez that it is
Completely stupid.
it is so crazily good, and it is so simple. If you're having a dinner party, you will wow people with this, and it takes all of about 30 seconds to make for as many people as you want. So good. I can't recommend it anymore. It's so amazing. I will say this: make sure your ice cream is frozen very good. The reason I say that is Pedro Jimenez does have a little alcohol, so it's going to make it start melting a little faster than normal. So you don't want to have like a scoop of homemade ice cream straight out of the churn, still kind of soft. With Pedro Jimenez, you have a Pedro Jimenez milkshake. Not that it's bad, but it's not going to be what you're looking for with this. I usually, if you're going to do it in a restaurant, I would scoop them out, put them in dishes, and put them back in the freezer so they get really nice and hard. So when you drizzle them, the little scoop still comes out looking really nice at the table. So can't think of a better way to finish.
Okay, guys, what I'm going to do, and hold on, there's one question. Art said we need to do this at the next wine tasting.